What if a single OAuth misconfiguration lets someone walk into your account without stealing your password or bypassing MFA? And what if plugging a laptop into one wall socket could lead to domain admin, cracked service accounts, and full internal compromise? These are the kinds of quiet missteps that still lead to load breaches. And in today's episode, we are closing out Season 1 with two powerful stories. A critical multi-tenant logic flaw in SSO integrations, known as nOAuth, that shows how fragile identity mapping really is. And a real internal engagement from one network port to domain admin, showing how layering small wins leads to full takeover. I'm Amin Malikpour and you are listening to Hacked and Secured Pentest Exploits and Mitigations. This is our final episode of Season 1. We will be taking a break to plan what's next. You tap continue with SSO and you are in. Smooth, right? But what if the single tap could let someone else become you? No password, no phishing, just a quiet logic mistake at the join point between your app and your identity provider. That's exactly what Omer Cohen documented in a DScope blog. He showed how a class of SSO integrations could be abused for full account takeover in certain multi-tenant OAuth setups integrated with a major identity provider. The issue is known as nOAuth. Let me set the stage in plain language before we get technical. This is an authentication logic flaw in some OAuth OpenID Connect integrations. Think of OAuth like a sealed envelope that carries claims about you, your user ID, maybe your email. The app receiving that envelope must decide, do I trust what's inside and what do I use to uniquely identify this person? Now imagine a building lobby with guest badges. The guard doesn't check your government ID. They just scan a badge that says your name and assume it's correct. If the printer upstairs lets anyone change the name printed on their badge, you can walk in as someone else even if you are not them. That's nOAuth in simple terms. Apps trusted an email claim that could be influenced by the user's own identity setting in upstream identity provider. And in some cases, they also treated that claim as verified when it wasn't reliably verified. Chaining those two mistakes together leads to takeover. Alright, here's how Omer approached this issue step by step. First, he targeted the join point, the exact place where sign-in with SSO turns into welcome new user or welcome back. Many apps, especially older ones, still map users by email at that moment. If there is an existing account with this email, log me into that, otherwise create a new one with this email. That's convenient but also dangerous if the email in the token isn't strongly bound to the real person in your tenant. Next, he looked at the claims coming from the identity provider, the upstream claims. In certain configurations, the SSO token included an email value that the user could influence on their side, and the app on the receiving side treated that value as final. No second check, no domain ownership proof, no invitation flow. The app simply said, oh, that email exists here? Great. Here are the keys. That's the crack in the door. Pause here and put yourself in the attacker's shoes for a second. You are facing a SaaS application that accepts SSO from many organizations. Which path to account takeover is more interesting to you? Guessing passwords and fighting MFA, or trying to influence the one field the app uses to identify people? If the email claim can be manipulated and the app auto-links by email, you aim for that, right? So as the final step of the attack chain, the attacker signs in with SSO using an identity they control upstream, sets or selects an email they want the app to believe and completes the flow. If the app links by email and assumes it's verified, the attacker lands a session as that email, and depending on how the app handles first-time SSO, sometimes creating a fresh account under the victim's address, sometimes taking over an existing one. If you are wondering how the authentication happened here, good to know that the attacker isn't typing your email and skipping the password screen. They logged into the identity provider as themselves with their own password and MFA. The problem is what happens after that. Your app takes the ID token from the provider and decides who this person is. If your app maps users by email from that token and the attacker can influence or manipulate that email claim, your app may link the attacker to your account. So the password wasn't bypassed. The account mapping was wrong. So what actually went wrong here? 3 simple things. First, email was used as the primary key for logging and linking. Second, the app assumed the email was verified even when that assurance didn't hold for the tenant in question. Third, the app auto-provisions or auto-linked identities across tenants without enforcing a strong trust boundary. Alright, if you are building or designing applications, stop keying accounts on email alone. Prefer the stable subject identifier designs for this purpose, the subclaim that is unique to your client. If you must rely on email, verify it yourself inside your app by invitation, by explicit admin approval, or by domain control checks, and only then link it to an existing account. Turn off auto-linking by email. Make first-time SSO a controlled step. Enforce a low list of enterprise orgs. If you expect users from example.com, require the upstream identity to be issued under a tenant you have explicitly trusted and match email domains accordingly. And log an alert on SSO first-time logins and account link events. For my fellow pen testers, here's your field guide. Map the join paths before you test anything heavy. How exactly does new SSO user become linked user? Compare ID tokens side by side and look for differences across tenants and settings. Learn which claims actually drive identity inside the target app. Try controlled claim changes in your own identity account and watch whether the app believes you. Sometimes the scariest bugs aren't 0 days. They are in the assumptions we make at the boundary between systems. Treat every claim in the envelope as untrusted until you have proven it belongs to the person at your door. That's the lesson of nOAuth. We just looked at nOAuth, how trusting the wrong identity claim at the boundary can hand over an account. Now let's step inside the company and see what happens when you assume an attacker is already on the internal network. This finding was contributed to our podcast by a listener who prefers to be known as pseudo user, and it's a great teaching story because nothing here is magic, just small gaps that line up. So day 1, they went to the client's office and plugged directly into the network under an assumed breach scenario. Assumed breach just means the client presumes an attacker has managed to get past the organization's external defenses and has access to the internal network. For example, this could have been through a phishing campaign and is generally the most cost-effective approach to get an internal security assessment. So they arrive on site, plug into an Ethernet port, and nothing. No IP address comes back. That tells you DHCP isn't enabled, so they didn't receive an IP address. You could give up at this point, or you could listen to the wire. They sniffed the traffic, learned the local addressing, and set a static IP that fit. There was no network access control, NAC, to stop them. So now they could ping around and run unauthenticated host discovery on the subnet. Quiet, simple, effective. But being on the LAN is not the same as being in the domain. To query Active Directory, you need a valid domain account. But how do you get one without a password now? Starting with names, they pulled likely employees from public sources like LinkedIn and guessed the username format. They also used a classic trick called RID cycling, where someone on the network, even unauthenticated, can leverage MSRPC null sessions to enumerate user accounts by brute forcing domain SIDs. Put those two together and you have got a solid username list. Now, how do you test passwords without locking out those accounts and users? They use password spraying over Kerberos. Think of it as knocking once per door with a single common key instead of hammering one door 100 times. It's fast and quiet, and when done carefully, it avoids the noisy login failure storms you see in the logs. Result: one low-privileged user account, not flashy, but enough to move. With a valid account, the domain opens up. They ran quick enumeration to map trust, groups, and services. Then they went for one of the most classic techniques every internal pen tester of Windows should know: Kerberosting. Here's the simple explanation. Service accounts that run applications often have service principal names. When you ask the domain for a service ticket for those accounts, the ticket you get back is encrypted with the service account's secret. You can take that ticket offline and try to crack it, so no more noise on the network. If the service account has a weak password, it's yours. In this case, multiple service accounts fail, some with very high privileges including domain admin. That's one full compromise. If that wasn't enough, they found a second path to domain admin. The environment used Active Directory certificate services and it was in a default weak configuration. They used another well-known attack, forcing a machine to authenticate to you, relay that authentication to the certificate service, and request a valid certificate that says, I'm this user. With that certificate, you can mint Kerberos ticket as that identity. It means you can go from unauthenticated on the wire to I can be any user I want, including the most powerful ones. That's domain admin again on day 3 of the engagement. At this point, they switched from can we get in to what could we do if we were a malicious actor. They browsed file shares and found the usual goal. Network diagrams, password spreadsheets, even notes about industrial systems. They pivoted to an admin jump box and found a password manager left unlocked, which gave them credentials to more critical systems like backups, and it's worth mentioning that nobody noticed any of these activities from the client blue team. No alerts, no questions, no blocked connections. Alright, if you build or defend environments, here's what could stop this attack early. Enforce network access control on every switch port so a rogue device can just assign itself an IP address. Make DHCP required and monitored, alert on unmanaged static IPs. Lock down the Windows services that allow anonymous or low-friction account enumeration. Enforce a strong random password for service accounts and if possible, use managed service accounts that rotate automatically and only allow strong encryption. Clean up legacy encryption in Kerberos that makes cracking easier. Harden and monitor your certificate services. Disable web enrollment if you don't need it. Restrict which templates allow enrollment. Require approvals for powerful identities and block authentication relays at the protocol level. Auto-lock password managers and treat file shares as sensitive. They are usually the fastest route to everything else. And some field notes for my fellow pentesters. Start with access and visibility. Sniff before you sprint. Build a clean username list. Guessing format is a skill, practice it. Spray slowly, agree on limits with the client before you begin. When you get a foothold, map identities before exploits. The quickest wins are often in the ticketing and certificate paths. And always remember, everything we just discussed belongs in a control test with written approval during agreed windows with consoles open for the client to watch. No denial of service payloads, no risky actions on production controllers, and no extra pivots to networks that aren't in scope. Our job as a pentester is to prove risk, not to create them. Most of today's stories prove something we have seen all season long. It's rarely one big mistake. It's the small assumptions about identity, about trust, about controls that line up and open the door. That's what makes real-world pen testing so powerful. It tests how things actually fail, not how they are supposed to work. And none of these stories would matter without responsible disclosure. Everything we have shared this season was reported ethically and fixed, making the internet just a little safer. As we wrap Season 1, a big thank you to everyone who contributed a finding, submitted a story, or helped shape an episode. Your input turned this podcast into a shared learning space. We would also love to hear from you. Tell us what you liked, what you didn't, and what you want more of. Your feedback will help shape what's next. If this podcast taught you something valuable, share it with someone else who builds, breaks, or secures systems. One story might be all it takes to stop the next breach. Thanks for being part of our first season. Let's keep making cybersecurity knowledge accessible to all. See you in the next season.